Thanks for the opportunity. We have a very interesting discussion today, so it's going to be a combination of presentations and a panel discussion around cybersecurity and some of the challenges with the global infrastructure that we have. So some of the things that I'm dealing with on a daily basis deal with this exact topic. So some of the areas that I focus on to help organizations kind of overcome some of these cybersecurity challenges. Software as a service. So as we look to digitize and look at consuming services, whether it's Microsoft Office 365 or different ERP solutions, a lot of these are now being delivered as a service. And the challenge is, where is that service being offered? Is it from AWS in Europe? Is it from Azure in the United States? Is it SAP within Germany? So being able to understand where your service provider is and some of those challenges with kind of the transnational nature of those services has to be factored into your thought process. Data sovereignty, we've already talked about that yesterday, of how do we maintain the sovereignty of personally identifiable information, sensitive information within our countries, given the fact that a lot of the services and a lot of the data resides potentially outside of our nation's borders. Global standards. Fortunately, we're starting to see a lot more global standards come online that affect the global community. So GDPR is a perfect example of how the privacy rules around data protection is not just for Europe. Any European citizen that resides in a foreign country should afford those same rights. And so we see that even in the UAE, where we have to follow GDPR rules for banking, for other services, because of the European citizenships that might reside in those countries. Artificial intelligence, we're going to have a great deep dive in AI tomorrow. We continue to look for different use cases. And some of the challenges we see is where the data is learning from, where the large language models exist, where is that training data, and does it have certain biases that might not be reflected in the initial uses of these AI technologies, but absolutely can factor into some longer term decision making. One of the organizations I'm supporting right now is a big development shop, and so looking at trying to convert them to a DevSecOps environment where you have remote developers from multiple different countries needing to have a secure development environment that is properly controlled with the right security controls, both management and technical, to facilitate proper development, but in that secure environment. And then you layer on artificial intelligence. How do you get the power of software development using AI where you still can protect the intellectual property being developed by those developers? Automation, that's another key area that we focus on. How do we automate certain workflows? When we talk about security operations, that's a big area we're focused on now, just because we're at data overload. We don't have enough human resources to really focus on security operations. So we need to automate a lot of those workflows. We need to be able to do automated detection, automated response, and really facilitate that type of process. Once again, if the data resides in different countries, across different infrastructures, how do you bring in that automation capability to properly execute and orchestrate, but in these constrained environments? We're also looking at a lot of cloud migrations. One of the experiences I had recently tied into data sovereignty is we wanted to migrate data from a European cloud infrastructure into the UAE, and working with the provider through that process, we also learned that there's additional expense to host the data in the UAE. So if you want to do a data migration to have that data sovereignty, you have to look at some of the additional aspects from the provider to see if there's additional costs. But it's been an interesting discussion with that provider to make sure we can provide that transfer, but then actually have to pay on a monthly basis to retain that data within the UAE. Lastly is around data-driven decision-making. So yesterday I learned a new term, which was global north versus global south. Very interesting concept, looking at how data is generated, how different learning models are generated, how decisions are made, and where that data is derived from. And so looking at, from that global perspective, where that data is coming from, how you can use it a part of your decision-making process, and really how you can factor in the vast amounts of data at our hands, but in a useful context for our specific organizations. So I want to give you one example that I experienced that kind of complicates where we are. And so we had a cyber incident in the UAE where there was basically a ride-sharing company called Careem. It was very similar to Uber In actuality, Uber bought them a couple years after this incident, but it really highlighted the challenge that we're going to talk about today. So basically, there was a cyber extortion. So a cyber adversary broke into their development environment, which was hosted in Ireland. And so it was a AWS infrastructure in Ireland. And they basically compromised 78 cities and 13 countries. So 14 million records of individuals and drivers were compromised. They also stole the source code of their proprietary application to basically work on the ride sharing. And so the attackers actually left a message for the CEO demanding a number of Bitcoins. If they didn't provide it in a timely manner, they would release the information. So when we got in there, we did some initial response. We found out the threat actor initially came from Germany. So their entry point where they exfiltrated the data was Germany. Obviously, that's probably not where they actually resided from, but that's where they at least transferred the initial data. So that created a very interesting environment. So we had the victim in Dubai, we had the data being hosted in Ireland, and we have at least one leg of the threat hunter tracking in Germany. And so we talked to the Dubai police. They basically said, yeah, you're the victim, but if the subject's not in this country, we can't help you. And we didn't know where the subject was other than the initial point was Germany. We talked to AWS in Ireland. They said, we just provide infrastructure or software as a service. It's not our responsibility to create logs, manage your cybersecurity program. And this was a semi-startup. They've been acting like a startup for 8 years. And so they didn't really have many security controls in place. They didn't have any logging in place. And so we were able to stitch together some ideas of what happened through virtual private network logs to ultimately identify the key source of the breach. We fixed it, and ultimately we were able to recover and move on from that. But what was interesting was the law enforcement jurisdiction. So we even asked AWS if they had law enforcement in Ireland that could help. And they basically said, yeah, this happens a lot, and they've realized that it's a waste of resources, and they really don't get to any conclusion, so they wouldn't be able to help. So looking at that international law enforcement capability for a non-law enforcement agency was very difficult. We also looked at how the cloud providers really provided minimal information. You could pay for an additional service to provide that, but most people don't have that, so it really focused on if you are consuming a cloud service or software as a service, you're still responsible for the security of that regardless of where it's hosted. So understanding kind of that very broad global view of your data and where it's stored and where it's processed, you need to understand what security controls need to be put there. Having that transnational cybersecurity awareness, so they had a very remote workforce. None of these people had any clue about cybersecurity. They didn't have that culture. They weren't provided the awareness training on a regular basis. And so having people's credentials stolen was what happened, and they weren't able to really recover from that. And so the other thing is around digital transformations. As it continues, as we create optimized environments, as we migrate to the cloud, the attack surface is becoming larger and larger. With mobile workforces, with software as a service, really that attack surface has really exploded, and you really need to understand how it impacts you from a cyber perspective, what security controls you need to have, and ultimately how you can properly protect yourself. So today we have a wonderful group of international speakers, and so I'm going to introduce each one now, but then we'll come up individually, provide a quick little presentation, and then we'll move on to the panel discussion. So Solmi, I've had the pleasure to work with Solmi. She's got 13 years experience predominantly in security operations and threat monitoring, threat hunting. She's currently working with SAP in Berlin, and her focus is around cybersecurity technology and the business strategy. Iman worked with her as well. She's coming to us from the UAE, where she's the Vice President of Network and Cybersecurity at Expo City, which is the legacy from Expo 2020, the global expo that was hosted in actually 2021 in Dubai. And she's focusing on pioneering sustainability, innovation, technologies, and cities of the future. So really that smart city and how we can really progress into the future. Jose is an international governance, risk, and compliance thought leader, and he has had the pleasure of working across the United States, across MENA, across Europe. So he's really had a global experience and is able to share some of those insights. And Dr. Gregors is an expert in the intersection of technology and security policy with more than 20 years of experience. Currently is a coordinator with the European Union's Dual-Use Export Control Global Program managed by the Foreign Policy Instrument of European External Action Service. It's a lot of words. So the format today is we'll have each presenter come up, give a quick kind of 10 to 15 minute introductory discussion on the topic, and then we'll start with a panel discussion. So if you have questions that come up during each presentation, please write them down. So we will ask if you want to participate in asking questions, and then we'll continue with that. So without further ado, it's all me.
So before I start, I would like to thank IDSF for having me here. Okay, sure. So as you all can see, I'm very new to this and I'm very nervous right now. And let me start with my presentation. So as Eric already said in the bullet points, we are talking about transnational infrastructure and software as a cloud services. So we have SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, platform as service, software as a service, infrastructure as a service. So I work with SAP, but today it is not about SAP. It's a product-centric company which sells product to the vendors, and we are talking about, majorly SAP is all about ERP solution, and I'm talking with reference to ERP solution, how the products are hosted in cloud, and ERP solution as a SaaS services. So ERP, little bit introduction about ERP. It's enterprise resource planning, enterprise resource planning that integrates the core businesses. When I say integrates the core businesses means we are talking about the data, that you input the data into the solution, and we process, we make insight to the data, and we give the best possible use of the data, and you can use for your business transformation. The major ERP solution providers in the market are SAP, Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics, and many more, which I cannot mention here. Why ERP on as a SaaS solution, on cloud solution? Because it enhances the scalability, availability, and integration, and easy automation. So as we see here, the users are at the end, and application, database, and the security is part of the cloud, and ERP is the main solution hosted in the cloud. So cloud are of different type. I don't know how much it makes sense to get into this technical aspect, but there are the different kind of clouds. It could be public, it could be private, it could be hybrid. Public is where it's a huge infrastructure where multiple vendors are located, depending on different containers they use. The basic technology behind it is the Kubernetes on Linux, and the containers are separated, and multiple vendors are on the huge infrastructure in public cloud. Private cloud is like a closed, small infrastructure dedicated to one vendor, and the hybrid is the combination of two. So talking about a cloud-based ERP architecture, it could be any other application as well. I'm talking about ERP because currently I'm working on ERP solution. So the major function that happens behind when you ingest the data is extracted and how it is transformed, and it is loaded for your best business use. And you as an end user can access the data. So basically when we talk about cloud, it is more about accessibility, it is about scalability and availability. So digital security on ERP cloud, there are different security measures that we have been talking about throughout, and everyone is aware of. But these are very easily available in cloud and very easily managed, centrally managed, like role-based access control, like encryption of the data, and different encryption algorithm depending upon your requirement, your organization. We can implement that, and the single sign-on or the threat detection anomalies finding. So the security measures are present there, but you have to be aware of which one applies to your organization and how you can implement that. Transnational infrastructure. So now cloud computing is very much a transnational infrastructure, like the cloud providers such as AWS or Azure or Google Cloud. They are situated, headquarters are situated in one or two nation, in one or two country, but the services are provided worldwide, which ultimately makes it international availability to all the vendors across the world, but the headquarters are at certain locations. So as Eric already coined that, the rules, law, and jurisdictions are different for different countries, but this is also opening a new horizon of accessibility. So yes, of course, with every opportunity, there is a challenge, but we have to be aware and have knowledge enough to overcome that. So there are the economic benefits, interconnectedness, and the broad implication of economic development, geopolitics, and environmental stability. So we have been talking about digital sovereignty and data and protection and compliance. That all applies, but we have to just create more awareness about the SaaS solution or cloud solution as a service. So depending on that, what we have studied, that there is a lot of benefit of using a software as a service, a cloud solution, hosting your application on a cloud solution and accessing from anywhere in the world. That reduces the cost, that reduces the maintenance. There's a research of 30% reduction in the cost, and there's an enhanced digital security and compliance according to your organization, according to vendors' strict security rules. It could be your choice of choosing your compliance, your certification, and you can imply that. Improved cross-border management and handling. So. Again, I know there is a complication related to it, but the awareness about which country's jurisdiction and which law applies, you can choose that and beforehand plan according to that, is here. So we're talking about, the picture shows that sovereign cloud security and public cloud. Public cloud, again, is a huge infrastructure. We are often confused about that using a public cloud or a private cloud will make my application or infrastructure or data more secure. But from where I see as a technical person, when there is a huge cloud and there is more focus on the security of that area, because there are a lot of more vendors in one particular place, and that security is even tighter than the private. It's same like having a big apartment building and a lot of elite people living in that, and one small villa where one person lives. The partying can happen anywhere, but both has its own pros and cons, but we have to look into the detail of the security from the security point of view. Comparing the two, legacy infrastructure and cloud infrastructure, we still have organization or vendors which prefer the legacy infrastructure, which is because of their security, maybe energy or the nuclear power. But there is still ongoing discussion about the moving to the cloud infrastructure. In the legacy infrastructure, management is quite difficult, where in the cloud, automation tools are available which can easily be managed, and that can be very much planned. But yes, the management is one of the concern. Access of the data in the legacy, your data center or your data is located at one point, but if you want to access from the other area of the world, it's difficult, but remote accessibility is more easy in cloud infrastructure. Scalability, again, cloud gives you the dynamic scalability. They have the huge resource already available. Depending on your requirement, you can choose how much scaling you want. You want horizontal or vertical, what kind of requirement according to your business. Security control, we are, this is a discussion, and we are, like everyone is new to this cloud or AI or these all new technology emerging right now. We all are learning, but the enhancing the security measure of the cloud is another challenge that we have. Predictable cost in legacy system, you can decide this is my range, this is my organization, this is what I have, and then you can go. But in the cloud, you have like you use and you pay, and you can increase and expand. You have that option there. specific compliance. In legacy, you have very predefined compliance strategy and governance and everything, but there could be shift in the compliance, or there could be shift in the change in the rules, and it is all the time upgrading and updating. So in cloud infrastructure, we can upgrade that and change that according to your model. So this is about the legacy and cloud infrastructure. Both have their own pros and cons, but depending on your infrastructure vendor's requirement, you can choose one of that. Conclusion is that the cloud platform, talking about ERP because that is the solution that I've chosen right now here, transforms your business operation, that your data, how you're going to process your data, what are the insight into the data, and what are the acceleration that you want to put in your data, and how you're going to use that data for your business as a better transformed model. That is what we can do with the use of cloud solution. Again, enhances the agility, ensures the security and seamless transaction that I already said, and it reduces the operational cost. Supports the remote work and collaboration. It strengthens the security and compliance. With this bullet is very what do you say? It's a dilemma, but I would say that because right now I'm using that and I'm learning that, and I'm going to support that for now. Foundation of digital transformation. It is. Thank you very much. I know that you have questions, but I think I'll come there and I'll answer better there.
Join me on the stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm using papers too, so just to make a note from yesterday, everyone's talking about. I'm happy to be back in Vienna. I love this city. And thanks to Eric, I always come back to it. So today I'm going to take you on a journey, first of all, from a global mega event into a living, human-centric city, Expo City, Dubai. It's a story not just about infrastructure, it's about resilience, it's about sovereignty and vision in an interconnected world. So Expo 2020 was a unique challenge. Imagine building a temporary digital venue that had to host 192 countries, operate seamlessly, but still remain secure throughout the entire event itself. At 4.38 square kilometer, we weren't just designing for an event, we were designing an ecosystem. The goal for us was a sovereign and a secure infrastructure that could stand up to global demand, but still feel seamless and open to everyone. So behind the scene, the numbers were staggering. We're talking about almost 90,000 wireless access points, indoor, outdoor, providing this unified Wi-Fi experience to everyone. We had 12,000 CCTV access camera running behind an analytic surveillance platform, which we called the Video Brain. We had 130 buildings that were interconnected and run through a central BMS solution. And we had 6 hybrid cloud data centers that was forming the backbone of operation. So we used, for example, Siemens MindSphere for IoT, we used AWS, we used Azure for major visitor application platforms there. So we had also 164 applications, out of which 53 were mission critical. That was powering everything from transport to crowd management as well. So at the core also, we had 2 networks, the Converge network that was connecting everything together, and we had an air gap network for the physical security, which we call the PSN. So what we did, we built a digital city from scratch, but we did it with a scale, we did it with a speed, we did it with sovereignty in mind as well. But we didn't go through the traditional route. We took a bold decision. We have implemented software-defined architecture. At that time, that was new. It was never implemented at such a large scale, but for us, it was transformational. Transformational in terms of how we manage security, how we manage scalability, and also how we manage sovereignty. What SDA allowed us to do is to go beyond the traditional static network into an intent-based dynamic architecture. It helped us to isolate traffic and devices based on identity, not only an IP range. And this was very valuable for us, especially that we had hundreds of users, devices, IoT devices operating simultaneously at the same time. Also, the centralized control over here meant that we could automate provisioning, we could enforce policies, and we could quickly onboard services. That saved a lot of time for us, and also it reduced risk, and it enabled the operational agility for us. Another key feature for this architecture was the visibility that we had. Integrating it with other platforms meant that we could have full visibility of the network. It helped us to detect anomalies early and also enabled proactive approach to threat containment. And I think what was the most valuable benefit or the powerful feature for SDA was scalability. We were able to extend the same fabric from Expo 2020, which was the legacy, into Expo City Dubai with very minimal reconfiguration. So that takes us into the transition period that happened after Expo was over. So everyone was asking us, what's going to happen to the site? Are you going to dismantle everything? All of the tech infrastructure that you invested at? We didn't dismantle anything. We evolved. We transitioned into an operational digital city that provides services to tenants like government entities, private sector, and hosting mega events. So we are a free zone, and you can consider us a smart city within the city of Dubai. And what started as a one-time deployment became a long-term digital foundation, and this is because we've invested and we've embedded security, sovereignty from the start, so that's why transition was smooth for us. Then came COP28. So that was immediately after we finished Expo, within I think 6 or 8 months. Expo City as a site was decided to be the location where COP28 would be hosted. I mean, with the strict UNFCCC requirements, you might think that we did a massive rework, but because of our decision and investment to go with a software-defined architecture, we reused much of our infrastructure, and the result over here was we saved more than $20 million. We maintained full compliance, and we delivered a highly secure global critical summit, and this is because we've invested and we thought of the future as well and how we're going to be able to reuse. And by the way, UNFCCC, when they host COP28, they go in a very traditional static network, and we went in a round of negotiation and discussion with them for them to accept the idea that they could go with some new network architecture, new solution, and we were able to create multiple tenant ensuring security as well for them. So that was a bonus plus for us. If we didn't have such an infrastructure, UAE would have to invest more than 50 million in building a tech infrastructure to host COP28 only. So the question now is, what have we learned out of this experience? First of all, design for permanence, not for an event. Second, sovereignty does not mean isolation. It means having control, having trust, having transparency. And for such an infrastructure to work, you need to bring together technology, governance, and also collaboration across all of it together. So we've been talking about digital infrastructure in an interconnected world yesterday, and sovereignty, all of that. As infrastructure becomes more global and interconnected, sovereignty or digital sovereignty is no longer about the data location itself. It's about governance, it's about control, it's about adaptability as well. What we did, we've implemented and went with a hybrid cloud model. That gave us the flexibility of a local oversight while leveraging global expertise, and it ensured operational agility and compliance for us. When it comes to AI, we've embedded transparency and we've embedded data residency laws to enable responsible innovation, I would say. We didn't want to be the showstopper. We also wanted to invest in AI. We also wanted to encourage also innovation as well. So reflecting on on data sovereignty, reflecting on the different policies, different sessions that we've attended yesterday as well. We had a lot of lawyers as well in some of the session. I think the afternoon session we had 3 lawyers at one of the panel, and I think all of us, we agree that digital sovereignty isn't about building walls, it's about building resilient bridges in order to secure by design. We're proud that we've created a model that served nations, industries and citizens alike, but this isn't just our story. It's a model that could be adopted, replicated, and improved by all of us. And I think the question I would want to leave you with is, how can we make this model scalable, secure, and fair to all the nations, not only the digitally advanced ones? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, I want to thank the International Digital Security Forum and AIT for this opportunity. And I look forward to speaking with you, panel members, and thank you again, Eric. I wanted to say today I would like to explore the governance, risk, and compliance challenges of maintaining digital sovereignty and resilience in an ever increasingly interconnected global environment. We'll focus on 3 critical issues. One is critical infrastructure, security investments, and cross-border collaboration. As digital transformation accelerates, the infrastructure underpinning economies and governments has become highly interconnected. And we've heard that already from Andres and Magnus, as well as the 2 former presenters, bringing efficiency but also increasing vulnerability. This demands a new governance and risk management approach, and I think our gentleman speaker from Sweden brought that to light. But in addition to what we need to do is implement controls. One of the things is that controls cost money, so we have to be astute in what we need to do. Infrastructure isn't just a technical asset anymore. It's a strategic resource critical for national sovereignty. The challenge is not only building strong infrastructure, but ensuring that it remains under sufficient national control, especially when we introduce artificial intelligence services, which are now regionally limited. And I think a good opportunity, a good use case is what AIT is doing with the Gaia project here in this country, and especially in the EU. One of the things of being a governance, risk, and compliance individual, as I was sharing with one of my friends that I just met from France, we're the last to be invited to dinner because we always talk about all the compliance, all the risk, all the governance situations that should be implemented in the front end. One of the things is definitely the rising cost. The rising cost of these controls, the rising cost of this governance, the rising cost of the resilience which is necessary. So securing interconnected infrastructure is very expensive and very complex. Beyond technical measures, governance frameworks must evolve, and I think you've already heard it from several other speakers. Nations must also collaborate across borders and address transnational risks without compromising what? Sovereignty. A good example is what Singapore is doing with the cybersecurity advancements of 2023 and 2024. They're working with operational technology, the cybersecurity master plan, as well as expanding on the Cybersecurity Act Amendment, and most importantly, the cybersecurity talent development. They enjoy training, proselytizing about cybersecurity. And this is a point that Andres made, that we need to educate our citizens, not only at the private level, but at the public level. Introducing cybersecurity awareness within the universities, as well as have cybersecurity training, something that is embedded in our organizations to be performed as required on an annual, monthly, or quarterly basis. Look, I'm a block and tackle individual. Yes, I should be part of the team. However, I'm always the last one to come in and assess a situation. From a governance, risk, and management framework, we need to apply risk assessments. Let's map all our digital assets, then perform a risk assessment, look at the gaps, and then introduce adequate controls which not only are valuable for the organization, as well as compensating controls, but do not burden the individual organization on lack of being productive. You know, we're talking about SaaS, we're talking about platform as a service, we're talking about infrastructure as a service. I'm a huge proponent of calling it compliance as a service. From a GRC lens on a digital infrastructure, I'm going to read these because I think they're very important. From a governance perspective, we need to define ownership and accountability. From a risk, let's identify, assess, and mitigate transactional risks. And from a compliance, let's meet the evolving regulatory requirements. Everybody in the audience is very familiar with RACIs, right? Responsibility, accountability, consulting, and inform. This is nothing more than an easy exercise in an organization, not only for government entities, but it's also for private organizations. A case in point is Australia is involving with a critical infrastructure security framework. And some of the key developments are using positive sovereignty security obligations and, of course, the critical infrastructure risk management program. The theme here is definitely sovereignty versus globalization. It's definitely a balancing act. Nations face a critical balancing act, leveraging the economic benefit of globalization while safeguarding sovereignty and critical data. Eric had mentioned an exercise that he performed regarding the sovereignty of information. I also have an example that I'd like to discuss at a very high level. We were brought in by a very powerful entity in the UAE when they were thinking of implementing SAP. And we went through a very elementary exercise to determine where the data goes. So once it entered into the SAP cloud and hit Germany for that perspective, what would happen if something was compromised? We determined in a very short period of time that the SAP cloud provider at that time had no jurisdiction or understanding where once the data was to be accessed, where it went. That was cumbersome and very high risk to the organization that we were doing the review. We developed a mitigation plan, and that mitigation plan was implemented. Cross-border collaboration. Why does collaboration really matter? No nation can achieve full digital resilience alone. Coordinating threat intelligence and harmonizing regulations are key to protecting transnational digital assets. I think a good case right here happens to be that the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence. And I think it's critical that nations, especially in the law enforcement, the Cybersecurity Information of Austria, Cybersecurity Intelligence Service Agency in the United States, we need to collaborate more and more. In putting together this presentation, I was amazed to find out that the country of Rwanda and the country of Korea have had an 11-year agreement on not only sharing data, trusting information, but they're collaborating now and they're connected with the EU and the United States because that's what we have. We need to be able to move data, but control it and understand it. One of our speakers just recently spoke about the cloud and the AI. So what is the road between cloud and artificial intelligence? What new risk dimensions are coming across? As cloud and AI adoption increases, hey, as a governance risk professional, we definitely have new risks that emerge, especially regarding where services are now available, how data is processed, and the growing dependency of just a few large providers. Some of the AI tools and APIs include the GP4, the DALI, Whisper, Code Interpreter. A lot of these are not available in the regions due to the mix of export controls. Export controls because we share information of the Office of Foreign Control Assets, as well as anyone ever heard of the International Traffic in Arms regulatory requirement? We deal with it daily. So it's important that we understand how we get these regional and providers. And I'm very happy to share that one of the regional providers in the UAE has developed a hybrid solution, a hybrid AI model called the Falcon system, and it's used quite a bit in the UAE. So from a strategic recommendation, strengthening the digital sovereignty, governments need to act to bolster resilience through what? Smart investments, robust regulations, and strategic technology partners. I believe a good case in point happens to be France's, excuse me for mispronouncing it, Cloud de Confiance, the trusted cloud, of which they have the European Alliance of Industrial Data, Edge, and the Cloud. Some of the closing remarks. I want to challenge not only AIT, but a lot of these government entities to let's focus on coming up with a good governance risk compliance model, especially somebody with my background doing digital forensics. And I think this would be another good opportunity for AIT to put a case study together. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that security and sovereignty, again, are not just IT issues. They're national priorities. Through strong governance, risk, and compliance practices, nations can secure their digital futures while enabling sustainable growth. And the biggest use case I have happens to be what Estonia is doing with their X-Road platform. So I welcome any opportunity at the conclusion of our presentation. If you want to further discuss some of the thoughts and concerns of your organization and how we can better control them, I welcome that opportunity.
I'm very glad to be again after 2 years at the IDSF. Thanks a lot, Eric, fellow panelists. A major challenge in that respect is that we need to see critical infrastructure protection in a context, in the shifting geopolitical context. And this is in order for us to bear in mind that the challenge is not so much the technological aspect, but the national, public security, national security, and international security aspect. And from that perspective, I will not be speaking in my External Action Service hat, but rather in my German Council on Foreign Relations hat, as I have been in an advisory role before drafting, in the course of drafting the third directive, which you very nicely bashed in your otherwise excellent presentation. But also, I will be speaking briefly about an ongoing process of tabletop simulations which are played with the 27 EU Ministries of Defense with the European Defense Agency. And the starting point is that critical infrastructure provides security to society and to a state. So we need to think of critical infrastructure, of security through critical infrastructure. A second challenge for policy design and policy implementation is that we need to protect critical infrastructure, so security for critical infrastructure. And the third and more wicked challenge is security against critical infrastructure. These are the cases when critical infrastructure gets weaponized. Now, this is a very challenging issue for a regulatory framework to consider and put in place. It needs to be a very, very complex choreography between public and private actors, also in the context of international collaboration. You have started today, Eric, with a brilliant showcasing that challenge that we are not there yet, of course, to manage, let's say, that sort of transnational coping with such cases, which points not to a technological gap, but to a legal and jurisdiction gap. So not every capability gap is of technological nature. This is the first thing to bear in mind. The second, I have been very glad to have Iman's smart city internet of everything, of not merely the things, showcase. And from my security and defense and strategic perspective, I would dare say that cities are along the urban theater, their core vulnerabilities from the perspective of national and international security. They can be incapacitated very, very fast. And this has been exactly the use cases we have been picking up in order to play in the context of the scenario simulation games with ministers of defense in the European Union. One can understand, of course, that this is classified information, but I can tell so much about that. We have been picking up hybrid cases where there has been a lot of blurred diagnosis. Is it an attack? Is it an accident? We had to cope with spillovers from sectors, and we're speaking about critical sectors such as food supply chains, water supply chains, not merely the cross-cutting energy and electricity grids that may create social and political destabilization. And of course, the transnational aspect, let's say the huge blind spots of who has the mandate to intervene there. Let's say windmills in international waters. These are huge unfinished business for regulation. And of course, all what is happening here, also in the other room with the exhibition of the technological advancement. I mean, we're grateful to consider that. Again, technological innovation can be only part of the solution. And also, now, the wicked twist, we need to make sure that this is not exploited in a malicious manner so that the capability does not turn into a liability. This is an important issue for a policy designer and policy implementer. Practically, I'm through with what I wanted to say by zooming out and remind that which is the problem. I think Ambassador Agathonos later on will speak exactly on the geopolitics of the cyber realm, and I think there's even a dedicated panel to that. We should not forget that critical infrastructure resilience does not take place in a vacuum. It is the incentive structures, the enabling or constraining structures come from the shifting geostrategic environment. And this is an additional layer of challenge that we need to consider. I will pick up, and I will end with that, and I'm happy to interact both with the fellow speakers, but also with the audience, that we still are in a paradigm shift from the static protection paradigm, critical infrastructure protection, to the critical infrastructure resilience paradigm. This is a different game. Resilience implies two things. Agility, you need to be agile, and you need to be anticipatory. So the way, I think, proactive, as you have said. I will end with that, stressing how important it is to play in a trusted and controlled environment scenario games, not merely plausible and possible scenarios, but also that sort of implausible scenarios that appear to be preposterous, ridiculous, never is going to happen. Why? Because strategic surprise is surprise because it always comes from the corner you didn't expect it to come. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for your insights across kind of a diverse topic around kind of digital security and the transnational infrastructures. So before I have my questions, I'll open up to the audience. Is there anybody that has questions for our esteemed panelists? Anybody? Excellent. That means I get them all. So I'll ask kind of a broad question for all four of you to start with. And this is around basically your views on how nations can protect their digital sovereignty while still benefiting from the global services and AI platforms that are available traditionally not within a specific country, but globally. So, ladies first.
Sure. So I am more on technical side. I am less aware of the legal and the governance and all that. But from technical point of view, what I think is to create more awareness about the technology, what they're using, what they're having in their organization, and how much the data that is getting ingested, what kind of processing that is happening. So from my point of view, I think we are lagging in information. We all talk about AI, we all talk about cloud or SaaS, but we are not aware much about like what is happening in that. So creating more open platform and more awareness about the technology, I think will take us to the next level, from my understanding.
Thanks, Salman.
Thank you.
I think by using hybrid architecture with strong policy enforced, what we did, we kept the central overload local, while and we were very selective in the cloud platform that we're using. We ensured that we had clear rules, policies that are in terms of data allocation, access, and governance, because at the end of the day, data sovereignty is not about rejecting all of these global services, is how do you make these services available based on your own rules and regulations.
Great. Thank you. Jose?
Yeah, let me start by saying that I think sovereignty, okay, and collaboration are not mutually exclusive. Now, by saying that, a wise man taught me you have to think like a thief. And in order to do that, again, remember, I'm not the individual that is going to be invited to a lot of dinner parties or out to dinner or out to events, because I'm always talking about block and tackle. You organizations, the governments and the nations and the transactional events that have to happen need a standard, okay? Be it a NIST standard, be it some type of cybersecurity standard. We need governance, we need resilience, as well as compliance. And it's up to you individuals in the audience to come up with that regulatory requirement, okay? I mentioned that controls cost money. We don't want to stifle creativity. We don't want to stifle the infrastructure that we're going to be bringing in. And just because we have a budget, let's not all use it to do the infrastructure that we might need. Let's take one step. Let's implement controls, look at compensating controls. Let's educate our users. And more importantly, I think, understand how we use the data and how it's going to be used.
Thanks, Jose.
I would, 2 points. I would answer that question in a complementary way to what Salmi and Iman said. I would start first with the regulatory framework or the political context in which technology needs to be applied, because it's something very, very different in Germany than in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates. So there are mutual constraints. This is the first thing. What comes to my mind, and I only touched upon it, is the critical, I would use the word critical, dependencies of national infrastructure upon private providers. One reads newspapers and so on. I would point to satellite infrastructure or to undersea cable infrastructure. This is a big headache, and this is a new twist that we need to cope with. So I wouldn't even dare to put in my mouth the word sovereignty, because we're very far away from that in that respect. We need to make sure that, I would put it also very, very diplomatically and carefully, that we put the money where our mouth is and make a proper investment in order to make some steps towards that sort of sovereignty. So much for now.
Thank you. So a few of you mentioned resiliency. And I think resiliency is something that is critical to, our cybersecurity programs. It's inevitable that there's going to be an incident. So having a resilient infrastructure and having the transnational infrastructure as a part of that resiliency may factor in. So I'm curious from each of you, from your own perspective, whether it's at SAP, Expo City, or you from a GRC perspective and you from a policy perspective, how is resiliency factored in at each of your levels in your perspective? Salmi?
Thank you. Let's start again with block and tackle. We definitely need the standards that we're going to apply. Policies. Now, I'm not talking about global policies that are embedded into, Microsoft Dynamics, SAP HANA, Oracle. I'm talking about policies that are written, and from an information security perspective, they're adopted, and the individuals that are dealing with them are going to be using them and educated on. Okay, so from an incident response, we have to have adequate playbooks. We have to be able to, we can't look in a crystal ball to see what our threat actors are, but we can prevent a large percentage of these coming in if we have adequate block and tackle responsibilities, governance, and resilience.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I will pivot Jose, just as he said. The playbooks are there, and the resilience is definitely important, and how the policies are written needs to be followed. But I look at it from very different point of view. I look as a technical person. I look how Kubernetes work on Linux. I look at how container is safe. So I can talk about that aspect, but not more about how the policies work and how much cost that it involves. So, but yes, I understand that aspect that you said, and I am with you in that resilience is very important, following that rules and according to that region or the country, the sovereignty we are talking about. So yes.
But so on that, let's explore. Yes. So resiliency of containers. How do you factor that in?
I am not very sure about how do I factor, but I know how it works, Eric. I am more on that side.
But do you have, different SAP cloud infrastructures replicate the containers?
Yes.
That is the resiliency model that you go with?
Okay. Yes, of course. So, different model has their own policies and then own rule applied, how it is getting replicated or copied multiple locations. Yes, that is there. But I think what is in the favor of the nation is should be applied, is what I understand from all the.
Eric, I got a question, and I think this is pretty good as a lead on. So, what about the end user? With all this containerization for the SAP, as an end user, if I'm in Germany versus Estonia versus in Delaware, I need to be able to get to my data. But if I have different containerization and policies that I have to go through, that is defeating the contract that I have with SAP. right?
That is very true, Jose. But with every opportunity we have challenges, and if you are using a BTP cloud business technology platform, definitely it will come with a different policy, different rules, and different. It's a German based cloud computing, so it will come with a challenge. I understand that, but we will have to go through it. And this is the challenge we are talking about: the sovereignty. We are talking about sovereignty. I mean, as Iman said, it is not about the control, but openness to learn more about it. But also we have to be a little more flexible, I feel. I mean, I'm not going to mess up with you. I know you're risk, you're everything. But I think as a technical person, we need to ingest more information to our brain and understand how it functions. And if it works for my organization, my business model, then take it forward. I mean, that's what I understand.
Iman?
I think listening to both perspectives here and thinking of the business at the end of the day, they see us as a showstopper. I mean, you think of security control regulations, she's thinking of how to implement all of this with the end user. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that all of these controls, the regulations, is not stopping innovation. I mean, when they talk about all of these AI platforms implementation, the first thing that comes to mind, oh, is that secure, what we need to implement? Then you're trying to narrow down the functionality and the feature of this AI platform that they're trying to provide different services, innovative solution examples. So they kind of get restricted with all of these controls. I think the resilient, in my point of view, how do we come in the middle? That we ensure all of these requirements and regulations, but we also want to make sure that we're not stopping them from using all of these new innovative and AI-driven solutions.
I have a lot of gray hair, so my next comment is, that's the $64,000 question.
Euro.
64,000 euro question. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, good. That's not very expensive, so we may think of buying it. So, three comments. I will start with a very specific one. Unlike, we have here the convergence of cyber and critical infrastructure. And this is tricky. There are certain differences, again, from a regulatory perspective. For cyber issues, it took some time, 15 years ago, but in the end, both at national and at international level, we established cyber security agencies. This is not the same with critical infrastructure, because critical infrastructure is so different and so sectoral. So we do not have something like that. There have been such deliberations, but it has been impossible to have one, let's say, oversight authority doing all the stuff. So this is a difficulty we have there. Now, a high-level comment on resilience. Since in my previous life I have been an engineer myself, and I would say that resilience, from the technical point of view, it is a well-defined problem. It is called robustness, that your gadget, your model works reliably within a zone. Well, when we speak about the resilience or the societal resilience or at state level, this is a ill-defined problem. It is a moving target. This is the wicked character, that there are conflicts of interests, conflicts of norms, and a level of complexity which is not very easily manageable. Let alone, I mean, if you start with such examples as the one that you started today, this is scary even within the European Union. I mean, whom do you call in order to find out now which is the next step? So, I would. These are the issue that I wish always to point to. At the same time, and probably, I mean, this is a comment of what technical standards should perform and what a regulatory framework should perform. I think the regulatory framework should always define purpose, the what for question, and the what, that is, which are, let's say, the tasks, which is the mission to be accomplished, but never delve into the how. This is our disagreement. Never. because it is a moving target, and the how needs to remain agile and be delegated to the actors or to the competent authorities that need to review the protocols and their models and adjust them. Technical standards need to deal, or implementation guidelines need to make suggestions about the how. This is how that sort of choreography ought to work. And this is how lawyers, legal advisors, policymakers, and technical experts need to come together and devise that sort of choreography, which is absolutely necessary in order to go forward.
Yes.
So everyone has a role in that perspective.
I agree. I agree with you. So yesterday we had a very beautiful session of women in technology, and we were talking about what has brought us all together today, talking about new infrastructure and new technology, the AI and ChatGPT and everything. So, I mean, the major thing what I understand is a lot of investment. We were talking about, and there's a lot of knowledge in terms of resources that we are consuming in building up the whole infrastructure, and the courage. So now we are talking about, do we have the courage to get our hands dirty and learn more about it and explore what good we can bring out of it? That's what, I mean, when I started my career 10 years back, we were not talking about this topic. We were talking about SIM, how the Splunk works, how the logs are ingested. Those are the things we were working, and source solution, that was upcoming analysis and all that. But now we are talking about cloud security. So of course, after 10 years, we'll be more stable from where I look, and I'm ready to put myself into it, and I have that courage.
That's great. One of the things I wanted to kind of dig a little deeper in, so there's always a concern about the how. And so Iman brought up hybrid cloud. And so I'm curious from your perspectives, so if a hybrid cloud is a solution to balance the data sovereignty, to the security, to leveraging transnational infrastructures, how is that decision-making process of what data resides in the country versus what is allowed out of the country? Iman, can you start, and then we can have others chime in?
Yeah, I mean, when we were preparing for Expo 2020, we looked into many niche customer or visitor experience, because for us, when we were designing everything, it was all about the journey of the visitor, from the moment they enter the door to the moment that they leave, and everything in terms of technology and everything should be an enabler for that experience. A lot of these niche platforms were hosted in cloud, like AWS, Azure, and all of that. And because we had certain regulation, and at that time GDPR came out as well, so we had to look into all of this. So some of them, the niche platforms, they cannot provide an on-prem solution. And if they provide on-prem solution, as you mentioned, as Jose mentioned, you need to look at a cost as well. And some of them, they do not support such a model. So we had to look in, how do we balance this? We went into discussions with AWS and how they can support us to do that. We went into discussion with government agencies in order to get, I would say, exceptions with providing certain compensating control that we guarantee that these controls are meant if you allow us to use some of those to host some of those applications. Yeah, this is how we did it. It wasn't easy as well, because when you look into compensating control as well, you need to be very strict and sure that you're going to be able to comply based on their requirement as well. And we were able to get waiver for some of them, but some not. So that went into the discussion with AWS. Then we used the Bahrain data, their Bahrain region, yes. So us having that relationship with Bahrain, if anything happens in terms of any incident, so we have already that relationship. We were able to enforce some of those compliances and regulations that we had on board. So this is how we tried to do it.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, I want to make a comment. I'm an introvert at heart, so. Iman, I was blessed on being on a project in the United Arab Emirates on developing several policies for the country. We were asked by the new Cybersecurity Council to come up with 8 policies, of which the organization that I was still employed with, and KPMG, we had the responsibility to put together a cloud policy. A lot of thought went into it, a lot of great discussion and debate. We brought it up to the Cybersecurity Council, but nothing has been acted on. And that's, I think, where this gentleman is talking about, okay, what is it, a push-pull technology, right? So from that perspective, everything has exceptions. And this goes with your point. We have to collaborate. We definitely have to collaborate. To this day, here we are, 2025, the UAE has not endorsed or formalized the policy, but we're moving ahead with on-prem, hybrid. I mean, we're also very successful in bringing in an on-prem solution for vulnerability detection program. So it's all about open collaboration, installing and implementing, thank you very much, compensating controls. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a look at the time here, which is pressing. I want to go back to the very disturbing example that you used for the opening of the session for good reasons, and say that there is an interplay here between the immateriality of ICT and the materiality. There is a certain materiality, microprocessors, data centers, they're located somewhere. We need to bear that in our mind. And this is exactly how that legal and regulatory is not always legal, it's not always legislative, there is also non-legislative regulatory mechanisms need to become innovative as well. So I will end merely with that by saying that innovation, but also capability, should not be simplistically understood as only technological. Also, law needs to become innovative. Also, capabilities are also legal capabilities to have an instrument which cuts. So, this is the thing, that we need also innovative regulatory frameworks to cope with that by bearing in mind all those parameters which are on the ground, and these are not merely technical parameters.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate the discussion. I think it was great to hear from the high level, from a policy making, legal making perspective, through the governance, risk, and compliance aspects, to a practical example of dealing with these challenges at a smart city level, all the way down to the technical level of a specific software as a service provider that has to deal with these security controls and transnational issues. So I want to thank my panelists. I want to thank the audience for listening to us talk up here today. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time.